The moment Karoline Leavitt stepped to the podium and announced that everyone in the Trump administration was working together like a single, perfectly coordinated machine, the room felt it before anyone could fully articulate why. It was the kind of statement that lands wrong the second it leaves someone's mouth. Too clean, too certain, too carefully assembled for a week that had already been falling apart in full public view. Outside the briefing room, the evidence against that claim was not hiding. It was front and center. An email from Elon Musk had just landed in the inboxes of federal employees demanding they prove their weekly productivity or be treated as though they had resigned. Cabinet members were sending signals that contradicted each other. The Iran situation was being described in different ways by different officials on the same day. And somewhere in the background, a summit at Davos had produced the now circulating story about Greenland being called Iceland multiple times, a claim the White House had tried to bury, with a response so convoluted it only made things worse. That was the environment Leavitt walked into, and that was the statement she chose to make inside it. Stephen Colbert was waiting. The studio audience was already primed before he said a single word. They had lived the same week everyone else had lived, refreshing feeds, watching headlines contradict each other, and doing the mental math that told them something between the official story and the visible reality was not adding up. When Colbert came out, he carried that week with him like a folder full of evidence he could not wait to open. He did not start with a lecture. He started with a picture. He described a football coach completely unraveling on the sideline, screaming impossible instructions at players who were staring back in growing confusion. Not general chaos. Specific, detailed, cinematic chaos. A coach ordering his team to sit on the football and hatch it like an egg, calling it strategy, calling it teamwork, calling it unity, and then turning to the cameras with the absolute confidence of a man who believed every word he was saying, while the scoreboard behind him told a completely different story. The crowd understood the metaphor before he even named it, because they had just watched the real version of that press briefing. That was the power of what Colbert did in moments like this. He did not argue with Leavitt's words. He did not pull up contradicting evidence or sit across from a fact-checker. He built an image so precise and so absurd that it became impossible to unsee. Once the crowd had that coach locked in their minds, every future administration claim about unity was going to arrive with a soundtrack of screamed nonsense and a football nobody could figure out what to do with. It spread instantly. Clips cut across platforms within hours. Comments flooded in. The segment was doing exactly what good satire does when it finds the right target at the right moment. And then the internet, being the internet, added its own layer. Videos began circulating with titles claiming Leavitt had appeared on Colbert's show and decisively destroyed him in a live confrontation. The clips were fabricated. Leavitt had never been on the show. The confrontation had never happened. Fact-checkers moved quickly to label and correct, and official confirmation confirmed the videos were manipulated. But the correction arrived into an information environment where speed beats accuracy almost every time. Colbert noted this with the tired precision of someone who had watched this particular cycle run too many times. He pointed out that the fake version of the story was structurally superior to the real one. It had a clear hero, a clear villain, a dramatic face-off, and a satisfying conclusion. Real life almost never delivers all four of those things in a single clip. So the fake version spread because it felt complete. And once something feels complete, the correction always arrives slightly too late to the same audience. That observation carried more weight than most of the jokes because it described something genuinely unsettling about where political media had landed. Three versions of the same story were now competing simultaneously. The official version, delivered from a podium with maximum confidence. The satirical version, delivered with a comedy sketch and a football metaphor. And the fabricated version, delivered with manipulated footage and a title designed to give one side a victory it never actually won. Depending on where someone was plugged into the information flow, any one of those three could feel like the truth. But the original story still had not finished, because Trump had seen the segment. He always saw the segments. Colbert had a particular ability to find the nerve endings, and this time was no different. The response came in the form Trump responses always come in. Direct, personal, and aimed not at the joke itself, but at the platform the joke came from. He questioned whether Colbert deserved the audience he had. He suggested the show was surviving on political shots rather than real talent. And then came the implication, never quite stated as a formal demand but unmistakable in tone, that someone like Colbert perhaps should not be on the air. Colbert's response to being the subject of presidential frustration was to use it as material immediately. He noted that being called out by the most powerful person in the country for making a football metaphor was itself a kind of confirmation. If the joke had not landed, nobody at that level would have bothered responding. The response was the evidence, and he folded that evidence right back into the segment with the efficiency of someone who had been doing this long enough to know that the best gift a late-night host can receive is a public reaction from the person they just mocked. The crowd recognized that logic and rewarded it loudly, but underneath all of it, Colbert kept returning to the deeper point. The one that made the segment more than just a collection of well-timed jokes. He described a communication strategy built entirely on repetition and certainty. Say the thing, say it again, say it with complete confidence, say it in front of cameras. Say it until it sounds less like a claim and more like an established fact. That strategy had worked in press environments where reporters had to maintain a certain professional distance from the obvious absurdity of what they were being told. The problem with that strategy in the late-night comedy era was that Colbert did not have to maintain any such distance. He was not required to treat the statement as a legitimate claim worthy of a measured response. He could just build the football coach and let the audience decide which image felt more accurate, and that was the shift this entire moment had exposed. Official statements got reported, satire got felt, reporting informed people, comedy stamped images into people's minds that no press release could fully erase. The administration could correct the record, issue clarifications, and deliver follow-up statements all week, but the image of someone ordering players to hatch an egg while screaming about teamwork was already living rent-free in the public imagination. Colbert traced how that dynamic played through every layer of the situation. The Greenland as Iceland moment, the Musk productivity email, the varying descriptions of the Iran operation, which was sometimes a war, sometimes not a war, sometimes both within the same sentence from the same official. He laid it all out not as an argument but as a tour, walking the audience through a landscape that had become so packed with contradictions that navigating it required a specific kind of comedy map. He brought up the pen again, circling back to an earlier moment that now felt like the first brick in a wall that kept getting taller. A president standing in a cabinet meeting delivering what amounted to a product testimonial for a ballpoint pen. He tied it to the same theme he kept returning to all night. Not the pen itself, not even the content of the speech around the pen, the underlying logic of a man who treated perception as reality and reality as something flexible enough to be reshaped with enough confidence and repetition. He moved through the dollar bill signature with the same slow reverence he always reserved for moments that were already too absurd for comedy to fully capture. Trump's signature being added to American currency as part of an anniversary celebration. He held up the image. He looked at it. He said it seemed a little subtle for him. The pause before that line was perfect. The crowd was already laughing before he finished the sentence because the image had done all the necessary work. And then he brought in the Iran thread, which had been quietly running underneath everything else all night, like a river that kept threatening to flood. He described the communication around Karg Island with the precision of a man who had been genuinely paying attention. Strikes ordered, results announced, more strikes potentially coming. Official language shifting between words like operation and conflict, carefully avoiding the one word that would change the legal and constitutional weight of the entire situation. He noted that the word war had been specifically flagged as something to avoid, which meant everyone was now using careful alternative language to describe something that looked exactly like what the avoided word described. He said it was not a war. He said this was very important. He said the president had told him so. And then he listed all the things currently happening that wars typically involve. The crowd laughed, but the laugh had a specific quality. The kind that comes from someone naming the thing everyone has been carefully not naming out loud. He connected it to the broader pattern he had been building toward all night. The communication style that avoided clear language. The press strategy built on confident assertion rather than transparent information. The media ecosystem that now included not just the official version and the satirical version, but the fully fabricated third version, running alongside the others without a clear way for most audiences to tell the difference at speed. He ended on the note he always ended on, when the material was genuinely heavy, not a big conclusion, not a call to action, just a quiet statement of the obvious, delivered in the flat voice of a man who had been saying it for years and had somehow never run out of fresh evidence. He said the cycle was not going to stop, that the next statement would arrive with the same confidence, that the next joke would follow within hours. that the next set of fabricated videos would appear before the fact-checkers had finished with the last batch, and that somewhere in a writer's room that never fully closed, someone would hear the next perfectly polished line and instantly know exactly how it was going to end. The lights held, the band waited, the audience sat in that specific mix of laughter and recognition that the best late-night television creates when it stops being just entertainment and starts being something more like a weekly reckoning. Then the music came back, the applause built, the night moved on, but the image stayed. It always stayed. A frantic coach, a football nobody knew what to do with, a team that was supposedly unified, screaming at each other in the rain, and somewhere nearby, a very expensive pen, sitting on a desk, waiting for the next signature. Hit subscribe, hit the bell, because in this story, the next press briefing is already loading, and the writer's room has already written the punchline.